The wet season had come to the island of Sodor, bringing with it a wave of storms that battered every part of the railway. The Little Western, which was right next to the sea, was the hardest hit. So, the Fat Controller had ordered stone to be brought down from the Farquhar branch, which would be used to make barriers to protect the line. Unfortunately, the Farquhar quarry was closed due to maintenance on the track, so Thomas and Percy had to bring stone down from the old lead mines instead. Percy didn't mind this, since it gave him the chance to see Duck again. Thomas, on the other hand, was less enthusiastic. He didn't like visiting the old place, since he had an accident a few years ago. Due to his own carelessness, he ignored a danger sign and caused the track beneath him to collapse, falling into an old mine shaft. The other engines loved teasing him every chance they got, Duck and Percy especially. He caught the two of them one day chatting in the yards. Duck was curious, asking Percy about the old lead mines.
Before the quarry opened,
He answered.
it used to be one of the most profitable businesses on the branch, or so I was told.
What happened?
Duck asked.
Times change, I suppose. I heard the place becoming too expensive to upkeep. Not to mention the opening of the Farquhar quarry was the final nail in the coffin. They did their best to keep afloat, like cutting costs and running the lines dry, but it was practically running on its last legs by the time Thomas arrived.
Duck had never really visited much of Thomas's branch line, so he was quite amused.
Tell me, Percy, what's it like up there?
Well, it's not the prettiest sight on our branch, I'll tell you that. We mostly had to be very careful when we go up there. A lot of the track and equipment had been run to the ground. And don't get me started on all the mine shafts that are underneath the rails. I heard the lads got really desperate by the time they started digging those.
Best not to mention mines, in case Thomas is about.
Duck joked,
Well,
remarked Percy.
he should have known the track wouldn't have been able to support his big fat bunker.
Thomas seized with frustration. He was never too keen on being offended. He knew that Duck would let him hear the end of it now that it was on his mind. The other engines on the branch had already teased him about it to no end, and he had grown as tired as the wear on his wheels. As he went to sort out his train, he started coming up with a plan. Thomas spent the rest of the day fussing up and down the branch. It was his turn to deliver the stone to protect the line. He found the work tiring and dull, having to constantly stop and start in different places so the workmen could unload his trucks and start building. Although, this gave him plenty of time to think of a scheme to pay the two green engines out. That evening, he waited in a siding for his last truck to be unloaded, but then Duck pulled into the station with a passenger train. He took note of Thomas's impatience and saw an opportunity for a tease.
More stone from the old lead mine?
He remarked.
Hope you didn't have to fall into another pit to get this lot. That wouldn't be the Great Western way, I guarantee you that.
Thomas groaned while Duck grinned cheekily.
But if I am being serious, I'm surprised you don't keep those mines in better condition. I've been here long enough to know that you guys take care of things very well. Not as well as on the Great Western, of course, but well enough. I mean, it's no wonder you managed to fall down an old mine shaft. You're just lucky that the Fat Controller was able to fish you out. I mean, back while I was working on the mainland, I've heard stories about engines falling down chasms and being unable to be rescued. Not on the Great Western, of course, but...
While Duck was chatting away to himself, a sneaky idea flew into Thomas's funnel. He did want to do this with Percy as well, but one engine was as good as another.
You know, Duck,
Thomas interrupted.
you do have a point.
a point? About what?
Duck asked.
Well,
Thomas answered, ominously.
you're right. I was very lucky to be rescued from those pits. Especially considering what happened to the other engine that used to work up there.
Duck was confused. He didn't know there were any other engines working up there before Thomas arrived. But at the same time, someone had to, otherwise the branch wouldn't have even been built.
Who did work on your branch line before you did anyway? I asked Percy about it and he didn't know.
Well,
answered Thomas. He paused ominously.
are you sure you would like to know? It's not a very pleasant story.
Duck stared at his smug face. He could see right through Thomas's cheeky deception. His trick was as plain as the number 1 on his side tanks. He knew it was best to ignore him, although his curiosity couldn't help but tug at his coupling rods. What other engines worked on the branch before him? And what did he mean by not being the first engine to fall down the mines? It could just be a stupid bluff to try and get his attention. All the same, he wouldn't know unless he asked.
Alright, Thomas, you have my attention. Who was the first engine to fall into those lead mines?
Thomas grinned mischievously. Duck had fallen right into his trap.
Well, my water-dwelling friend, I overheard what you and Percy were talking about earlier, about the lead mine closing. And while most of the stuff is true, like the mine running dry and becoming too expensive and all that, that wasn't exactly the main reason.
Duck raised an eyebrow.
Alright, what was it then?
Thomas felt giddy, but he didn't dare show it. He began his story.
Long before I took over the branch for my own, it was ran by a small fleet of odd-looking engines called coffee pots. The first and last of them, called Glynn, I knew him. He was a nice fellow. He and his brothers and sisters ran the line very well, taking passengers from their proper destinations and collecting goods up and down the branch to take to the harbor. All of the clients appreciated their work, but none more so than, of course, the old lead mine. Whenever the coffee pots would come, they would shunt a row of trucks into the mine shaft to be loaded up. They would then take the loaded trucks down the branch and to the harbor, be taken to the mainland and beyond. All the engines were warned to be careful when going up to the old mines, especially when pushing their trucks into the mine shaft. One derailment could trap a group of miners at best and cause a cave-in at worst. All the engines understood. Well, most of them. This coffee pot was number 4. He was painted green and had cow catchers, so he can go up the old tramway. He meant well, but he was very cheeky, often playing pranks and scaring the other engines and staff. One of his favorite things to do was disappear in the old tunnels of the old lead mine while shunting trucks, only to jump out and surprise anyone who dared get too close. Everyone warned him to be careful, but he took little notice. His driver and firemen weren't much help either. They didn't see any harm in the engine's pranks. Just a little fun, they would always say, and for the longest time, I suppose it was, until that fateful day. The little green coffee pot was shunting a row of trucks into the mine shaft to be loaded. He and his crew weren't paying much attention. Normally, one of the workmen would act as a banker to make sure one of the trucks didn't derail. However, almost everyone was on break, and the crew were too impatient to wait. It probably would have been wiser if they did. They were halfway through the tunnel by the time they were noticed. "Stop! Stop!" one of the workmen shouted, but they paid little attention. The little green coffee pot especially. He was too busy pondering about his next victim. The crew disappeared into the darkness, and before any of the workmen could chase after him, the entire mineshaft collapsed. Luckily, no one else was in there, but the trucks, the engine's crew, and the engine itself were completely buried alive. There was nothing anyone could do. They didn't have the proper equipment to save them, and even if they did, it would be too late either way. The old lead mines weren't the same after that. Strange things would happen to the workmen who would go inside the tunnels. Some of them started getting sick, becoming timid and disoriented, even when they started mining beneath the track. It didn't help much as the years went by and the coffee pots started being withdrawn and scrapped. Business started declining at the old lead mines. Very few people were working there by the time I came around. Most of them quit due to sickness or to fear. But if you were to ask one of the sick ones what they saw while they were in the mines, they would claim that some of the rocks would glow a bright green before seeing the ghost of the engine and his crew chuffing through the mine shafts, never seeing the light of day again, but always looking for someone to scare.
Thomas,
said a very dismayed Duck.
did you honestly think I would be scared of a stupid story like that? If telling me that rubbish was your way of trying to get back at me, I'd say it failed miserably.
Thomas didn't say anything. He just kept grinning mischievously.
Okay, fine. If you really think that I'm lying to you, then why don't you go up there and see for yourself? There's one last stone train that needs to be delivered for tomorrow. If you don't believe me, then you should be able to bring it here without fuss.
I can't.
Duck said sternly.
I have a ballast train to take this afternoon.
Then how about we swap?
Suggested Thomas.
You can go up my branch, and I'll fetch your ballast train.
Duck pondered this for a moment. He wasn't too fond of playing by someone else's rules, but he was interested in seeing what the old lead mine looked like. In the end, curiosity got the best of him.
Alright, fine. But I'm only going up there to look at the place, not because of your stupid story.
Sure,
remarked Thomas.
just make sure to keep an eye on the shafts. You don't want number 4 popping out to drag you into the mines.
Duck snorted and puffed away at the sound of the whistle. At first, Duck was enjoying himself. He strolled down the line enjoying the evening air, surrounded by the innocent cries of small animals, and the wide open fields, and the trees as green as his paintwork. He found it quite peaceful. However, his mood soon changed as he came to the old lead mines. Duck surveyed the area.
Phew! Percy was right.
He said, disgusted.
This place has seen better days.
Throughout the area, he could see rotten buildings that looked like they would collapse at any second, and rusty sidings that looked like they hadn't been touched in a long time. On one of the rusty lines, he could see a red danger sign with a giant trap hole in the middle of the track.
That must have been where Thomas had his accident.
He thought. But then something else caught Duck's eye. He could see a lonely mine shaft in the distance, with most of the track in front of it ripped up. This made Thomas's story fly back into his funnel.
Oh, why am I even thinking about that?
He remarked to himself.
That Thomas would do anything for attention. He was just trying to pay me out. I swear, if that engine ran on cheek instead of water, his boiler would have melted by now. Honestly, he's really running out of ideas if he thinks he can scare me with a stupid story like that.
Duck kept grumbling to himself as he arranged a train for him to take back down the branch. However, despite everything, he couldn't help but feel uneasy as he traversed the old sidings, and even more so when he went near the mine shafts. Whenever he did, he couldn't help but feel like something was watching him in the void. Night was approaching fast. There weren't many lights around to illuminate the area, so everything Duck saw became more disturbing. He was glad that he was nearly finished. He just had to shunt one last row of trucks onto his train, and then he could return to the safety of his shed.
Finally,
He said to himself.
See, Thomas, nothing to worry about. Now, I just hope Oliver remembered to put the coaches in the right shit. Ah!
All of a sudden, as Duck was reversing out of the siding, there was a huge bang, and a cloud of steam erupted from him like a volcano.
Duck, are you alright?
Asked his driver.
No.
Said Duck weakly.
I think that was my safety valve. I should have known to check it before we came up here.
Unfortunately, he was correct. It was a safety valve, which had burst. His driver and firemen shut off steam and went to find help. It didn't take long for night to fall after that. Duck had remained static in the siding for what felt like hours, and he was starting to lose patience.
Seriously, does it take this long on the branch line for some help? This is not the Great Western Way. And where are those two? They don't normally take this long. Oh well, I guess I'll just get some rest. It's not like I'm going anywhere.
And before he knew it, the Great Western engine drifted off into sleep, where his nightmares were fully awake.
Wahoo!
Duck didn't know how long he was asleep. The only thing he did know was that he was startled by what sounded like an engine's whistle, but that couldn't be. It was far too late for any of the engines to come up here. Duck tried to get his smoke box together.
Who's there?
He yelled. No one replied. All he could hear were the sounds of insects chirping in the fields, an owl in the trees, and the sound of puffing in the...
Wait, what's that?
Duck thought.
Puffing?
It was. Duck's eyes darted about to look where the sound was coming from. His gaze was led to one of the old mine shafts, which he was parked next to. Duck was confused. Percy told him that most of the mine shafts had been boarded up. Engines weren't allowed to go in them due to how unstable they were, and yet he could hear the slow beat of one, and it grew louder and louder with each passing second. Duck rallied his courage.
Thomas, is that you?
He demanded.
If this is your poor excuse of a joke, it's not funny. I would have thought you'd learned after what happened to you here, but hiding in an unstable mine shaft, that's not the Great Western...
Duck was cut off by what sounded like laughter. It didn't sound like Thomas's voice. In fact, Duck couldn't recognize it at all. It sounded like a child, and a very malevolent one at that. Just listening to it amongst the puffing caused his paintwork to crawl. Then Duck heard another sound. It appeared to be the turning of rusty wheels. They sounded like they hadn't been oiled in a long time. The Great Western engine was speechless. He couldn't do anything but just stare at the mine as the sound continued to grow louder and louder. His eyes shut as he tried to drown out the noise, but to no avail. Whatever was in those mines sounded closer than ever. And just when Duck thought things couldn't get any worse, he heard a loud, deep-toned whistle booming louder than his ever could. Duck was petrified. He wanted to move, but he couldn't. He didn't dare open his eyes to see what was going on. He didn't want to see what was going on. The only thing that his closed eyes could pick up was a green glow seeping through them. Duck didn't have any courage anymore. He couldn't even speak. All he could do was listen. The next morning, Thomas was puffing up the branch in reverse to collect Duck and his train. The blue engine felt very pleased, even if things didn't go to plan. His original idea was to finish Duck's ballast run and then sneak up to the old lead mine where he was still working to try and scare him. However, the run took longer than he thought, and he was unable to make it there in time. He fell asleep that night very disappointed, but his mood quickly changed once he found out about Duck's predicament. His boiler was bubbling with excitement, eager to tease Duck. He strode alongside the Great Western engine, with his well-known face of cheekiness.
Well, well, well,
He remarked sarcastically.
thought you could survive the night here, huh? Did you manage to spot any coffee,
Thomas was taken aback by what he saw. He thought Duck would be mad at him, but when he saw his face, he looked as pale as the steam from his funnel. His eyes were wide open. He didn't even notice Thomas coming in. He was entirely focused on the old mine shaft that he was parked next to. Thomas's surprise turned to concern.
Duck?
He asked.
Are you alright?
Only his driver responded.
We asked him the same things when we came here this morning.
He said,
You should have seen him. 1 minute he was dozing there comfortably, the next he was screaming louder than his whistle. He hasn't told us much, other than he had a bad dream. Makes me feel bad that we had to leave him here for the night. But we couldn't get help until morning, and he was fast asleep by the time we went to tell him.
Thomas felt sorry for Duck, and guilty towards himself. He wanted to pay the Great Western engine out. He wanted to scare him, but not like this. He didn't say any more. He just shunted Duck in front of the train, and buffer to buffer, the two engines puffed